Good afternoon. And to start off, I would like to invite Mr. Jim Cook to give a speech. Because of his extensive background, we don't really know what to give his title as. You can call him a consultant, an engineer, a corporate leader, an author, but we decided to call him a Chinese entrepreneurship enthusiast based on his current interest and passion. Mr. Jim Cook took his own software company public 30 years ago on NASDAQ within 4 years. And with his extensive knowledge about China, I'm pretty sure he'll have a lot of interesting experience to share with us all today. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Jim Cook.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome back from your break. I'm glad you're all here. I'm delighted to be here, in fact, honored. I love the introduction. It was spot on. I am a China entrepreneurship enthusiast. Started the company in Beijing about 10 years ago. I need to get closer to the mic, that's okay. And so, for all you young, enthusiastic entrepreneurs, I think I have a new marketplace to recommend to you. It's a marketplace that I have no experience in, and that is typically entrepreneur. It's so new that there isn't a large experience base. Just like when I went to China in 1985, and back in the States they said, that's a country that has donkeys on its main street hauling carts. What on earth do you think is going to become of that economy? And so I knew nothing about it, but I jumped in and have never looked back. So let me begin with the new market, and that's where entrepreneurs should look, especially as capitalism runs into larger market challenges. Oh yes, I know it's a young group. I wasn't even born. But when I got back, I hung out with the professors, and they said, just what I told you, what are you doing there? And I said, China will grow 12% compounded annually. And then I said, and they said, what's the logic of that? And I said, you forget Tokyo in 1950 looked like Beijing in 1980. And then I listened for a moment, and I said, the Chinese will learn from the Japanese as well as from the West. So they will build 6% on their 6%. And then the math says in 2010, Beijing will be like Tokyo. By golly, Beijing is like Tokyo. But if you think that was believable in 85, as they say in America, we have a bridge for you to buy. So now so many wish it could be repeated. In fact, Ford Motor Company, I sent them a note, more than a note, a strategy for China that matched the Gongchangdang fighting the Kuomintang. And I said, you know, Mao looked very, Chiang Kai-shek looked very invincible, and yet Mao, with 1% of the forces, ended up beating him. And by the way, for all of you who love and would love to follow Sun Tzu Bing Fa is when you have 20% of your enemy, or 50% of your enemy. It is not for when you have 1% of your enemy. It takes even more creativity than Sun Tzu Bing Fa. And Mao had it, and all the rest is history, including some bad history after he got in charge. But before then, he did a lot of good for Chinese people. There you go. Now, at first I thought that was a Tokyo station. It might be, but now it's only 2 stories. But it doesn't really matter. You get the message. And there's 4,000 words, so I'll skip over it. But one thing to notice, private automobiles. There's 3 in the Chinese picture. It's almost like a quiz. Can you find the private automobile on Chang'an? So, I love this. There was no red book in 1949. This was done by a Westerner and not by me. Around 62, 63, the Red Book came in. But at least the farmer, although they may not have got much, they have a cell phone. And here's the emerging market, I promise you. I don't see any electricity there. There might be, but I don't see a single sign of it. But I do see poor people working hard to bring themselves up. And we've all been to those kinds of open markets. They're really quite a social event and worth every moment of it. And most of all is the lower right-hand picture. Customers, rabid customers, wanting product. Do they want brand? Not in the village, they don't. They want product. So all that brand building that big companies are doing, you can just cut that corner. And you can play with production out of balance. They made too many, they don't want to mess up their city pricing. You say, okay, I'll grab your excess and I'll sell it in the village for a low price. Why? Let's see what we have here. Aha! Can you make money with villagers? Chinese. My wife reminds me, can you make money? What are you doing today? Ford became the richest man in the world, selling to the least expensive cars, selling the least expensive cars in the market. Not only that, he not really bankrupt, he ended 2 companies. Before doing that, he was constantly at war with his board of directors. He would not relent because he chased the market that wasn't obvious. He chased the market he had no experience in. He chased the market where it appeared there was no money to be made. And he became the richest man on earth. Walmart, you may not know, Walmart actually had a strategy, we're not going to the cities. Walmart went to the intersections of interstates, went out in the countryside, and said basically, Kresge and Sears and the like, they own the cities, but they don't own the suburbs. In Levitt and Sons, none of you probably, except for the Americans, none of you know Levitt and Sons. There's a town in Long Island and another town in Pennsylvania, both called Levittown. And all the towns, what Ford did to cars, Levitt did to personal housing. And all those men coming back from World War II, married, you can imagine that, and then starting a family, they didn't have money, but they got houses for less than the rent that they would have had to pay in the city. And Levitt became the largest home developer in the United States. So you can get rich on the poor, but you know, almost every great entrepreneur, at least the ones that I like, don't go in for the money, they go in for the satisfaction. I don't think you'd ever find Steve Jobs saying, I did it for the money. That's not where it's at. So, and if you want to know a general principle, a person hardly anyone I ever heard of, I had to look it up on the internet, Willie Keeler. He had a 385 batting average, which is led, for 100 years, led the National League. He had the most base hits. He had the most consecutive years, 8 years, of base hit hittings. And he had one and only one secret. They asked him, how do you do it? He says, I hit it to where they ate. So, now, to my feeling, how do you get up every day? How do you fight the war of entrepreneuring? You actually can do it. And you'll have the energy from within, not somebody pushing you, with a vision. And his vision was, and he said it, and he said it in 1905, 3 years before he had the Model T design, or in production, and he said, he's going to build, his vision was for the great multitude. Large enough for a family, small enough for an individual to repair and maintain. Constructed of the best materials. He wasn't cutting corners on the materials. Hired by the best, hiring the best men. He wasn't cutting corners on wages. And wanted to price it so low that no man making a good salary would be unable to own one. If you have such clarity of a vision about the countryside, which is where I want to go today, you can succeed, maybe not financially as Henry Ford, but perhaps more importantly, in the quality of your life. People earn money to have a high quality of life. What if you cut out the money part, the money middleman, and you went directly for the quality of life? These are decisions that you have about your life at this time. And part of that surprise, and this surprise impact is to tell you that straight, linear, step-by-step logic doesn't work in complex worlds. Economics is complex, life is complex, nature is complex, villages are complex, and cities are designed to be simple. Transportation systems are unnatural and simple. Buildings are unnatural and simple. So, but in the complex world, he put out a $5 a day wage. Everybody was waiting for him to go under. But what did he get? The year before, he had a 300% turnover rate. 4 months was the average time of a worker to stay in his company. $5 a day, you can be sure they didn't leave. Why? It's twice the alternative. Think about it. You might be shooting at 60 or 80,000, and an employer comes up to you with 120 or 160,000. You say, well, is it a good employer? Is it work I'm interested in? I guess they didn't have that luxury. But they came to him in droves. And who are those droves? These are thousands upon thousands of poor people. I stress, thousands upon thousands of poor people. Because poor people are your emerging market. And so these thousands of poor people all got up out of bed, out of whatever. Maybe they even left their job to come to apply for the $5 a day that Henry Ford promised. Oh, there's a little sidebar. He had been so successful that he had a lot of cash when he did this. Now, this is 1914, and he put the Model T on the market in 1909. So he had at least 4 years of cash. And that had built up so handsomely that 2 of his directors, the Dodge brothers, wanted to have a distribution of cash to start their own company. And he said, wait a second, I need to make a commitment for that cash. So all is not benign and humanitarian in the Ford's history. But the key point is, in his thinking, he was thorough and he went for a double play anytime he could. That is, he wanted 2 benefits for the price of 1 cost. And he was very astute about that. So, to chase the villagers, really, you can start with a declaration of beliefs. These are just mine, these aren't yours. You make your own list. So, people don't like to start with a blank sheet of paper, so they can start with mine and cross them off and enter theirs. But begin with a declaration of beliefs. Villagers are, can I ask a personal question? How many people would say they come from the villages of China? Here. You know, this is class, hands. Oh, wow, perfect, perfect. I can say anything about villages and nobody will hold me accountable. So, and that's a point. Because I read a book, and the book said, the village behavioral culture. You know, there's a lot of talk about culture. Culture, art, literature, history, those things are nice. But the real culture is the inaccessible, automatic, habitual, behavioral patterns that undermine every day. And those that are in the country are very different than those in the city. By the way, of the Americans who grew up in the countryside, we have 2. So we have balance. And I lived about 4 hours from New York City, Shijiazhuang to Beijing. And we used to always say, we're from New York, not the city. And when I read a book about Nang Dao, the way of the village, I read it in English, the way of the village, I was startled at how the ethical, moral, and habitual patterns of the village Chinese are like the countryside where I grew up. I said, wow, that's what I've been looking for. And so I felt right at home, and I met you. I don't mean you. I don't know the tones of you, Xiaojian. But I met you, Xiaojian, and told him that that's for me. I want to go to the countryside. And I'm not a shafang. It is not a put down to go to the countryside for me. For me, it is a great delight. And villagers are resourceful. Look, they take any context and make a life out of it. They're more anxious to better their lives than ordinary city folk. And city folk think, I went to college, I work hard, I watch the ads. What? How can you say that? And how many of you went from Gansu to Guangdong to get a menial job because you wanted to help your family have some cash? They're not brand followers, rather they choose what is available. Available is a keyword. To fill a real need. You come to them with something that fills a real need at a low price. They could care less what the brand is. They're driven by, I've just already said this, and the reason big companies can't get to them is that the big companies want to mass market. And the villages, each village is quite different. They are formed by their context, by the hills, what can be grown there, by the marketplaces, the distances to the river. All of those things are integral to the process, to the life in the village. And large multinational corporations can't put their arms around that, don't know how to develop policies for that. So it's wide open territory for you. It's so much so that the central government, which has repeatedly wanted to do something for the West, even back in 1953, 54, Mao was very appreciative of the West. And they tried to have plans to give the West money, and the West took the money. But nothing sustainable came of it. And so now, actually, it's the third try of the government. And if the government will if the central government will stay out of it, use trust and entrepreneurs to match the individual places, those people in that process will thrive and will have a great quality of life. And oh, by the way, may make a lot of money and may not. If you're in it for the money, the village character will smell you're in for the money, and you won't be as welcome as you are in the city. So what's your job? Your job is to create alliances, to use flexible support, and go out and, I don't mean you should do this, I mean you should decide to do this. I hope after this talk, maybe 20% of you will decide, maybe there's something to that. That's my only purpose. Maybe there's something to that. Oh, now I have no face. I have to declare ignorance, and it's pretty substantial. The political dynamics of the county, of the party secretaries, of the cadres who get circulated around to the villages, and what actually goes on with who are the powerful families and so forth. I don't know how to do that. The villagers, as a group, don't have a priority other than getting by till the next crop season. Each of them has a different priority. And I don't know how their past experiences will relate to a city folk. And I don't mean myself, I mean you. You city folk, I'm talking to you now, going to the countryside and saying, I'm here to help. I know in America you say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. the intellectual antibodies go into hyper. It's like, oh, you're here to help. Well, how do I minimize your help so I can get to tomorrow? So, and there's a rhythm to the seasons, which there's bound to be opportunity in. You have lots of idle time. And you have, so, where is it? They've got aspirations. I'm sorry that more of you aren't from the countryside because you could lean over and ask a neighbor and say, how'd you get to Michigan? And maybe countryside can't get to Michigan. Maybe they can't, but they want to. That's something for Michigan to think about. And we have infrastructure. And we don't even think about infrastructure except when we pay our taxes. You don't pay taxes so much. We get hit by taxes in Dearborn, where I live, and it's like, wait a second, what'd you do on the sewer system that hit me with that kind of money? The sewer system was put in 100 years ago. And I've consulted on what I call step change. And that's very much like a skunk's works, except the ones I did were inside the company. And one thing I knew going in, and later turned out to be quite substantial, was that when you make a large change in performance, it's probably credited to somebody or something that is not already in the establishment. Now, Machiavelli put this out, why good ideas get squelched. And it's the establishment has made their own nest, and people who have destructive changes really interfere with the nest that has been made by those in power. So this whole marketing idea in the States is starting to grow in part out of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Prahalad, Stuart Hart, and Yu Xianjian have pushed the base of the pyramid. The idea of the base of the pyramid is that there's an upper and middle class, and then there's this gigantic, highly populated lower class. And the notion is that where the needs are today are in that lower class, and the opportunity is to tap it. And it's a systems challenge. It is not a marketing challenge. Really keep that in mind. If you get the context and the system working for them, then it's just like the stadium in Iowa. They will buy. But if you just go after them with price, you won't make anything, and they'll just get to see another day. So what to do? U of M, I call it MI because I'm from Massachusetts, and we have University U of M is University of Massachusetts. It's a reserved word. So you're U of MI, my apologies. And but U of MI has special access to the leadership in China. And I mean leadership at the Liu level, the people advising Xi Jinping. Not one level lower than the advisors to him, but the top of the line, Professor Wen at Renmin People's University, for example, where Yu Xiaojian is yesterday. He's not up there in the morning, early morning. But what to do? One option you have is to intern. Go to an NGO and say, hey, I don't know anything about the villages except that 50% of China, I say that, I think it's between 48 and 52, but I think the latest number is 52% are in the cities now. 48% of China is in the countryside. And we have a giant pollution problem. Part of it is originating countryside, but even more of it is destroying the countryside. I want to go and intern in the countryside. Go to the NGOs, not the MNOs. That's if you have heart for this. If you don't have heart for this, don't do it. Do things you have heart for. I'm a technology person. They don't need much technology. But I think my heart's bigger than my mind. That's not the and then don't innovate before doing some homework. Innovate. If you look at Henry Ford, you know, many people think of Henry Ford as, oh, he barely got out of grade school. No. Look at his career path. First, he repaired watches when he was 10 years old. He repaired them better than anybody. Then he went to work for a die casting and molding company. Then he went to work for a company that made railroad cars. Then he discovered, you know, electricity has some role in the cars. Then he went to work for an electricity company where the greatest thing happened to his motivation. Edison took an interest in Henry Ford. And that really charged up the young man. And so he got an education by always going to what does he need in terms of technology arbitrage. Not, let me go study a car company, let me study another car company, let me study another car company. No, he said first principles. Let me study electricity as it is practice. Let me study manufacturing as it is practice. And it is in the practice, which is what separates the really successful entrepreneurs. Chasing the practice. So don't go and innovate business models for the countryside without doing research, including the practice, including trying it out on the villagers. But the answer is going to be in business models. And I think Stuart Hart has a section in his book called It's the Business Model, Stupid. And that goes from he's not insulting us, he is drawing on a 1993-92 campaign slogan, which said, it's the economy, stupid, because people were arguing about a dozen different things in the political campaign. And it's generally in America, there's one giant issue. If it's not war, it's economy. And Chinese, I meet Chinese, I want to know what car do I drive, how many people work for my company. And it's sort of like, you know, in America, ideas count. So why don't you ask me how many ideas I have? And in fact, I don't have a lot of ideas. I have a few good ones. So, you know the story, but look at this. Mao's at his bottom. He has maybe 10,000 troops. Jiang Jieshi is rising to meet the Japanese challenge with the great American help. He has 1 million troops. That's 100 to 1. He's got airplanes, cannons, bombs, guns. As Peng Dehua used to say, oh no, Mao said, Jiang Jieshi is my quartermaster. Quartermaster is the one who is the place where you get your military equipment from. And this is something else, 2 other things from the revolution. Peng Dehua, Mao said, hey, Peng, we have to go out and fight this battle. He said, oh, okay, more recruits. He would go to a battle, come back with more soldiers than he left with. And so, it is in that spirit that he won the countryside. Mao said he never wanted territory, he wanted hearts and minds. Make no mistake, he went off the rails after, say, 1956. But I am an admirer of his up until 1947. Oops. Oh! Did I do it? Oh, did I do it? I did it and then some. It's okay? So, one thought to remember, the universe is full of magical things waiting for our wits to grow sharper. Mine are only half shut, but I'm working on it. Thank you very much.